Hello, everybody. This is an emergency podcast, Florida History Podcast, Florida Squeeze. Maybe we'll put some of this out on tropical depression as well. Kartik Krishnaiyer and Ryan Ray. First off, we hope everybody is safe out there. Everybody who's listening is safe after what we've gone through the last few days in the state. Helene, epic storm, historic storm for Florida. But Ryan, you were up there in Tallahassee. This is why I wanted to have you on. You're up there in Tallahassee, went through all the precautions at the same time as you are a Tampa native. You are from Tampa. This has got to be the greatest paradox for you. You're worried sick the last several days about where you're home now in Tallahassee, and we're thinking, okay, we see the tracks, we see the storm. People like me, and I'll get into this as we get deeper into this podcast, have a lot of history with storms. I'm kind of an amateur forecaster of storms. I was dead on with Ian, which I guess is something that now people have used my accuracy with Ian to attack the National Hurricane Center for their lack of accuracy in forecasting that compared to me, which I kind of regret that, because I think we need to put our faith in government and institutions and scientists and experts. But you're preparing in Tallahassee diligently. The Tampa St. Pete area is a bit of an afterthought. Okay, they'll get some storm surge. They'll get some bad weather. I'm watching Dennis Phillips, as I always do, around storms, the great meteorologist in the Tampa Bay area. And, he's saying kind of what we're saying, right? Okay, Big Bend, Tallahassee. Okay, here are the potential effects for the Tampa Bay area. If you're in Zone 1 in Hillsborough and Pinellas, we want you to evacuate. But, ultimately, this storm is going to pass us by. What a paradox. I mean, you are from South Tampa. So walk us through your emotion and very much like some of the analysis as we try and unpack this in kind of a raw way so quickly.
Yeah, well, it's good to be with you, Kartik, and good to talk with you. And I hope that everybody listening is staying safe. And our thoughts are with everybody that this monstrous hurricane has impacted. Yeah, so as you know, the predictions for Tallahassee were very grim. And the kind of conversation or narrative, I guess, if you will, about this hurricane was all about the Big Bend. And basically, this was supposed to be the big one for Tallahassee. After having been untouched for so long, there was supposed to be an impact here in the capital city. It obviously ended up making landfall in Taylor County and devastating that community again. And Steenhatchee and Keaton Beach, some of the really lovely singular Cedar Key, poor Cedar Key, has gotten another horrible impact. And our thoughts are with everybody.
And apparently, real quickly on Cedar Key, apparently about 90% of the structures are damaged in Cedar Key, damaged badly, which was not the case with the previous storms that had gone through there. So this was really bad for them. So, but continue.
An iconic place, yeah, Cardiff, some place that's special to you and me and to the spirit of Florida and the history of Florida. But yeah, the story has all been about the Tampa Bay area. As you were saying before we got on this pod, Kartik, I think 100-year, at least, modern history epoch-marking flood event for Tampa. And yes, where I'm from in South Tampa did fare poorly. I have a dear friend of mine on Davis Island who has been negatively affected. I mean, there's a 10-foot storm surge in the low-lying areas around the Tampa Bay. And the St. Pete side, the Pinellas side, ravaged as well. We were seeing reports come in from all over the area. Peter Shorsh reports that his neighborhood was destroyed by the storm surge, and our thoughts are with him and everybody who's been negatively impacted there. It is it's something that we've never exactly known when this was coming. We always know that it was coming. At a certain point for Tampa, it was not supposed to be this storm. This was not the way that it was drawn up. And I think that everybody as a state, we're still sort of coming to grips with exactly what happened here. It's truly a monstrous storm, larger than the state of Florida.
Yeah, so that perspective is really important because I guess I knew it was going to be bad Thursday morning. Now I have a history, as people who follow me for a while know, Ryan, of keeping people updated, saying take every precaution. If even if you're not under a storm warning, treat it like the storm is coming to you. Don't pay attention to the cone from the National Hurricane Center. All of that stuff. This time, myself in South Florida, because of where the storm was traveling in the Gulf and my knowledge of historical storms that make a beeline for the Big Bend, not the storms that turn into Southwest Florida or even turn into Homosassa, Cedar Key area, right?
A common path.
Yeah. And those storms do impact Southeast Florida. The storms that maybe make landfall, let's say, in Citrus County or Levy County. But something that was projected to make a landfall in Franklin or Wakulla does not. So I even let my guard down and said, why is the National Hurricane Center putting us under a tropical storm warning? Well, I have to tell you, the wind gusts and the damage in my neighborhood was far worse from this storm than it was for me. And although Ian, we had a tornado that came very close to me, and that created and then landed maybe a couple miles west of me in the Everglades. But with that exception, worse than Ian, worse than Nicole, worse than some of the other. Eta was another one that came and which whipped up a bit of a storm surge in the Tampa Bay area. That might have been kind of a precursor event in 2022 for this. And Dennis Phillips referred to Eta. But we had wind gusts of 65 miles per hour at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, 73 miles per hour in Opelika. Jacksonville had pretty intense wind gusts. And then the storm surge came into Naples, into Tin City, came into the low-lying barrier islands in Lee County, which got ravaged, obviously, by Ian. And so at that point, Ryan, when that as it's moving up the state, and the whole state is engulfed in tropical storm force winds, you don't see a storm in 100 miles in the Gulf throwing sustained tropical storm force winds in Miami or in West Palm Beach or in Fort Lauderdale. But that's what it did. Maybe that was the ominous sign, because what we saw initially out of Naples and Fort Myers indicated that the storm surge might be a little higher than expected. So what I was told out of Naples was that it was 2.5 feet. That wave that came into Tin City. And if you're familiar with Naples, Tin City is right downtown, right off of 5th. Their projected storm surge in Collier County was 1 to 2 feet. So, knowing that it was 5 to 8 feet in the Bay Area, right? That was what the NHC said. As I said, I watched Dennis Phillips on Wednesday night with his live stream, and he said he was expecting, and he warned about what had happened during Eta, which is one of the storms I mentioned. But that 5 feet would be terrible, right? That's almost our height. But that's all it will be, right? It's not going to be 8. It's not going to be 10. Well, in fact, it was. And historically, I've been searching my brain through Florida storms. I was thinking of storms in the 1960s, storms like Donna that engulfed the whole state, or parts of the whole state, or Irma, obviously, in 2017. I finally have come to a historic analysis of what happened to what's happening and happened to the Tampa Bay area, which is even more unpleasant, Ryan. Katrina did not hit New Orleans directly. It hit in Mississippi. It hit the same spot Hurricane Camille, which was a Category 5 storm in 1969, hit. And Camille had very little impact on New Orleans. But it was the water churned up by Katrina and the angle it came in that created the sensation, right? And the chain of events that led to what it led to. Similarly, with this storm, that's the only comparison I can make. Even though it's 80, 90 miles out at sea, it took a little bit of a jog towards the Tampa Bay area, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock a.m. on Thursday. But this, Ryan, I hate to say this and want to get your thought on this. This is a Katrina this feels like a Katrina-like event for the Tampa Bay area. We're seeing similar types of scenes. Helicopters lifting people off their homes in Davis Island. Whole neighborhoods in St. Petersburg wiped out. I do a lot professionally in the Tampa Bay area, so this is why I've been in touch with people all day from there, and was actually on a live stream with someone from Hillsborough County when their power went out on Thursday. They are seeing levels of disaster that remind me of Katrina. Sanitation services not working in St. Petersburg, plumbing issues, raw sewage floating through the streets, alligators on, because there are a bunch of like bayous and lakes, especially when you get to northern Pinellas County and into Pasco, alligators in the streets of northern Pinellas. I mean, it is just. It's beginning to remind me of Katrina, and we take our responsibility seriously here, Ryan. I don't want to throw out that hyperbole, but it kind of feels like that.
You've got severe storm activity from Opelika down to Miami-Dade all the way to eastern Leon County.
Yeah.
All the way in the capital near the Georgia border. And lest we forget, Georgia and Atlanta has taken on serious damage from this storm as well.
Valdosta as well. I should mention real quickly Valdosta, which is one of our near neighbors, really devastated.
Hit hard by this monstrous storm. There's no question about it. It's really unique. I mean, every storm, every Andrew, every huge storm that threatens Florida is unique. But of course, they all have their comparisons as well. And unfortunately, Katrina is a bleak thing to compare a storm to. But I can see what you mean.
Yeah, and your point is well taken. So Opelika, 73 mile per hour winds, Miami-Dade County. Lamont, which is in Jefferson County, gets ravaged by the western eye wall and Capitola and extreme eastern Leon County. That's the
unincorporated Leon County.
Yeah, that's the length of the storm in the state. And at the same time as I've never seen a graphic like the one I posted on Twitter, which came from the National Hurricane Center, so it wasn't some fake graphic generated by someone on social media. The entire peninsula of Florida was covered by tropical storm winds, and the entire panhandle east of probably somewhere in Gadsden, or Franklin, if you're talking the coast, so somewhere from Franklin County. So probably everything east of the Apalachicola River, and the entire peninsula at the same time covered by tropical storm force winds. An absolutely amazing kind of I guess. Maybe this is one positive way of looking at it, Ryan. It was a shared event for all of us. All of us were going through it at the same time.
You talk about it's such a grim thing. I mean, the way this might be the only way that Florida constitutes a community of interest.
Right.
From tip to tip. Bob Graham used to talk about how the counties in Northwest Florida and up here are smaller because the going practice was that you should be able to return to the county seat from a day's ride out of anywhere in the county. So they're demarcated smaller. And I think that one Florida is exactly the length and dimensions of one of these monstrous hurricanes, unfortunately.
Yeah, and this gives us our geographic realm of what is Florida, right? Everything. We don't want to. We've done a podcast previously about West Florida, right, west of the Apalachicola, but at least everything east of the Apalachicola down to the Keys, one Florida.
Everything I can touch.
Yeah. So let's talk about Tallahassee. You were involved in the evacuation, some of the planning at the city level for what happens in Tallahassee. This ended up being like a massive fire drill for you guys, and maybe something if Tampa Bay had gone through before, although they kind of did with Charlie in 2004, right? I mean, but still, like this massive fire drill that you guys drive around Friday morning, and things are beginning to get back to normal. And I know Leon schools are reopening Monday, and Florida State is reopening Monday. FSU soccer is playing a game. Here's your direct comparison. FSU, the national champion, FSU women's soccer team will be hosting Clemson Saturday night at FSU Soccer Stadium. The Tampa Bay Rowdies, who I work with, and this is one of my professional interests in the Tampa Bay area, who play in St. Petersburg, have had to scrub their match at Al Lang Stadium. And the Tampa Bay Sun, who I also do things with, that's the live stream I was on, when power went out in parts of Hillsborough County, the Sun had to be flown out on a charter flight from TPA to Charlotte before the storm so that they could play the game in Charlotte on Friday night. Because TPA was going to close and things are not normal in the Tampa Bay area. So anyway, Tallahassee, talk us through everything and kind of your emotion for all of this from Tallahassee.
Well, again, the level of destruction that's been wrought across the state is immense. And this is a catastrophic thing for a lot of people in the state. Specifically from a Tallahassee perspective, from the beginning, this was supposed to be the Tallahassee killer. I, had been thinking about it as potentially the big one. We all were. My day job, I work with City Commissioner Jeremy Matlow here, and we were both moving at all times with the possibility that this could permanently, severely damage the landscape of Tallahassee from the beginning. As soon as we began to hear about what this thing was, of course, everybody imagined it. I mean, Tallahassee discourse is animated by the trees. It has become a proxy for the developers versus neighborhood politics that animates our local government. It has everything, Lichgate, these magical trees, these huge live oak trees. It's in the city's seal. It is in it is a fact of our life. The canopy roads are an iconic, specific Tallahassee contribution to the landscape of our state, and everybody involved, anybody who was being realistic and being practical, was imagining a world where we lost the majority of the trees in our town, and that every single road would be blocked by trees. The canopy roads debate would essentially be resolved right away. Hey, these are open for development. These are, who knows what kind of changes. The ricochet effect of public policy, the very nature, the spirit of Tallahassee, what we are and what our priorities are, were very much involved in the outcome of this. Whether there was a takeover from private utilities or from state government, any number of things here, functions. When disasters occur, changes in a government's setting can happen, and things by emergency powers are done, and it just shuffles the deck in a way. And we were all completely, and we were not alone in it. Everybody. I was getting messages from across the state, across the country, basically thoughts and prayers like, we're thinking of you. Please stay safe. Are you still there? And so, my cat Dagmar and my lady friend, we decamped to a hotel room on Gaines Street, in view of the Capitol, in view of the Turlington building, named after the great Education Committee Chair Ralph Turlington, and that right here in the very middle of right outside downtown, looking at the landscape of Tallahassee, seeing the live oak trees, and this an hour and a half before impact, this continued bump eastward. I understand that there's like a cold front involved. There's some very idiosyncratic, unusual, irregular things happen to make this thing.
Continue in a minute, Ryan. I do want to mention, as someone who's studied these storms for so many years, this was a meteorological anomaly, this storm. And so continue, because that stuff conspired to save Tallahassee.
The great senior writer Jeff Burlew in the Tallahassee Democrat has an interview with a senior meteorologist here locally who's saying that what happened was a statistical miracle, and that you run this model many times and you did not come up with this outcome. And so it has been unbelievable. I don't know what to say. I hate to feel anything other than sympathy and other than deep regret and concern for the people that are affected by this, still really in a severe way. But in terms of since your question was about Tallahassee particularly, probably in that hour and a half, before impact was about to happen in Wakulla or parts south of here, the prognosis for Tallahassee changed positively by, I would say, at least conservatively 70 or 80%. I mean, it's in the paper right now how 10 miles made all the difference from Tallahassee. And that's it. Just a few degrees of distance made it from a potentially catastrophic, completely overhauling event, a once-in-a-century marking event for Tallahassee that signaled basically a completely new era, into basically a minor inconvenience that was about comparable to the tornadoes that came through here a while ago. So definitely still very sad and tragic, and obviously horrible for our brothers and sisters across the state. But for here, a dramatic change of fortune, and living through it, looking at it directly in the state capitol was a unique experience that I'll never forget.
So, Channel 10 in the CBS affiliate in Tampa St. Pete has an in-house hurricane model that was apparently built by IBM, as IBM must consult for the station, right? And I've heard about this. More and more local stations in the U.S. are building their own meteorological models because of extreme weather events that might happen in their community. And they don't want to rely on like the national or the international, the Euro models and the GFS models. The GFS being the American global model, and the European model being the Euro global model. There's a German model, there's a Canadian model. And these things do very well forecasting the weather. And actually the GFS and Euro began to adjust their track towards Taylor County toward the end. So I do want to point that out. But this IBM model that Channel 10 in Tampa St. Pete had basically showed this track into Taylor County and it going further east. And I on Wednesday night and Thursday morning are saying this is ridiculous. They're just trying to create hype and clicks and concern in their own Tampa St. Pete media market so more people watch, because we know all the tropical models are telling us Franklin, Wakulla, really Franklin, Wakulla, and then what side of the eye is Tallahassee going to get, right? That's what the tropical models were telling us, the ensemble models that make up the NHC's forecast. We began to see some adjustments in the Euro and GFS American model later in the day on Thursday, actually. So like Thursday morning, everything was in pretty broad agreement, except for this model that a TV affiliate in Tampa St. Pete was running. And that ended up being accurate. And they ended up getting this epic event, this storm of the century or storm of 2-century event. So, Ryan, you're from South Tampa. Take our listeners through the geography of South Tampa, the McDill area, West Shore, Channel Side, Davis Island, because maybe people who haven't spent a lot of time in Tampa or in Hillsborough County don't realize that when I threw out the Katrina comparison, which I didn't do lightly, there are some geographic similarities with New Orleans that maybe people need to be aware of with Tampa.
Yes, and I just received word as we speak that, and this is just becoming clear actually to the people involved, that Egmont Key is, quote, a total loss.
Oh, no.
Right,
jeez.
A preliminary report.
And Ryan, I should point out real quickly, thank you to you and your female friend for going there for us at the Florida Squeeze a year or so ago. I've been meaning to go. We've had Dr. Angela Zombeck on this show to talk about Egmont Key, right? We did a series of podcasts with her about the history of Egmont Key. I was planning to go to there in Fort DeSoto when I got to the next Rowdies game next month, the next one I'm going to. Yeah, that's what's happening.
Really,
that's what's happening.
From a person who is intimately familiar with the workings of it, there's a chance that there may be a structure or two remaining, but there's a few cottages that are used by professional pilots that are out there. They have been totally swept out. Most structures are either damaged completely, severely, missing walls. sitting in the middle of a field, just totally without any solidity anymore. So I mean, structures that have existed for I don't know, well over a century have been damaged, according to these early preliminary reports. And the only people who have ever really lived on Egmont Key or any appreciable amount of time there, those residences are, according to what I'm just seeing, is probably completely gone.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, and Fort DeSoto, probably similar. We'll obviously update people on that in the next few days.
That's the thing. This is continuing to unfold, and people are still making sense. People are still making sense of it, and heads or tails of what all's going on. Gosh.
So I'm going to get to St. Petersburg in a minute, a city I'm very intimately familiar with, and one of my favorite places on the planet. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about Tampa.
Yeah, no, please. I mean, for Tallahassee, Tampa, I mean, there's just so much catharsis that needs to happen everywhere. Please, by all means.
So Ryan, describe. You're from South Tampa. South Tampa, MacDill, Channel Side, West Shore. Explain for our listeners how low-lying these places are, and also the causeways between Tampa and St. Peter, in the case of the Courtney Campbell, between Tampa and Clearwater, that they basically sit on the water.
It's a part of every day. It is not a region. That the Tampa Bay area there, and the Tampa and St. Pete connection, all of that, this mega metropolis, millions and millions of people, one of the fastest growing places, hottest real estate markets in the entire country, going on decades now. So crazy. Growing up there, you could really see what hyperdevelopment was like in real time. I mean, there's endless stories there. The fact that there was, Hurricane Charlie was supposed to come up right through the mouth of it, and really do it in. That didn't happen. And so the specter of that happening, which is a total loss all around the low-lying communities there, had always hung there. And it seems like, unfortunately, a part of that eventuality has come to pass here with this horrible Helene damage. Yeah, I would say that probably Tampa. I mean, growing up in South Tampa, the smell, knowing when low tide was just a part of the culture. It intimately, the smell of the air, the being by the bay and seeing it in the distance as part of your day is just absolutely a part of it. And it's to an Amsterdam or New Orleans level of highly developed and densely populated areas that are at or below, in some cases, the sea level. I mean, all of it is, there's not a single basement anywhere in the city of Tampa. There is not, you are hitting water 12 inches into the ground or less, and you are just, it's one of the largest American cities that has such a close proximity, as that's so low-lying. And, flooding is an issue in Tampa and other Bay Area locales with sun showers even. It's not quite to the level that it is in Miami yet, but there's flooding in some of these antiquated areas, especially as clear cutting happens and there's less and less permeable soil and undeveloped areas out there. Flooding is becoming a real concern. And this was probably the triggering event of flooding in the area that one unlike we've never seen before.
Yeah, in fact, Tampa is so on the water, much like Miami, as you said. In Miami, we know, we've seen so many documentaries about how unsustainable Miami is long term in terms of sea level rise. But Tampa, the water is so indispensable in Tampa that the Tampa Bay Sun, whom I mentioned earlier, the women's professional soccer team, they play at Blake High School, which is a magnet school, Hillsborough County School District. It is easier in many ways to take a boat up the Hillsborough River from downtown, from Channel Side, from downtown, to get to the matches than to try and drive and park
100%.
there. Yeah. And so working with that club, that's providing like water shuttles, water taxis to games is something that's been done. And I've talked to people with the club today. Like I said, they're playing a game up in Charlotte, but they may come back to Tampa and see all kinds of damage, is what I'm guessing. Right on the Hillsborough River.
We're talking about essentially a subtropical area, Kartik.
Yeah. And so, similarly, St. Petersburg, a city I'm very familiar with, no one's more familiar with than St. Petersburg than Peter Schorsch. Our sympathy, our thoughts go to him and Michelle and the family, because they look like they're right in the middle of it. And Peter Schorsch, the editor of Florida Politics and a friend of our website. St. Petersburg has now gone through this spurt of development you've talked about has happened in Tampa. St. Pete was a little later to it, but even when I was there less than a month ago, I pulled up. First time I was staying in the Hilton downtown. I used to basically have my own room. I would be in the Hilton St. Pete once or twice a month about a decade ago. But I pulled up expecting to park, and I realized the parking lot that I had always parked at the Hilton, which by the way is a block from the Bay. Right?
Right.
It's by Al Lang Stadium, by the Mahaffey Theater, and Albert Whitehead Airport.
One of the best places in terms of quality of life, in my opinion, in the entire state, or really in the Southeast.
Yeah. And like I said, one of my favorite places in the entire country. I pull up into the parking lot. I pull up to get into the parking lot, and I realize, holy crap, they just built a 20-story condo building in the parking lot. Now I have to valet at the Hilton. And as I walked Central, Central's kind of the same, so let me not say that. But as I walked the streets adjoining Central, and I just walked the streets leading to the Bay in downtown a month ago, I realized, my gosh, there's all these new buildings that have popped up. There are all these new residents in St. Petersburg. They're all living right on the Bay, or a block or two from the Bay. It didn't dawn upon me what is going to happen when the big one comes.
A world historic boomtown.
Yes.
And one of the most ecologically, or I suppose topographically, geographically vulnerable places that we've ever seen. I mean, I think that you see the kind of ongoing crises of the shores of Florida, constant beach renourishment that must be done all over just to keep our existing shorelines. You think about that, you think of the constant efforts and time and resource and money sink that is just to stay where we are right now, and to say nothing of the the increasing impacts of climate change that are just changing the map.
So sea level rise, we've talked about the barrier islands in Pinellas County. So if you take the Pinellas Bay way out, or Treasure Island Causeway, or the causeway to Clearwater Beach, those are all closed right now as we record this. Those islands, and then let's say Miami Beach also, these are two of the most ecologically exposed places on the planet with sea level rise. And so, as tragic as this storm is, Ryan, I'm hoping maybe we realize we need to stop building in these places. We can't keep building in Clearwater Beach. We just can't. Logically.
It's the most concrete. Yeah, it's the most concrete expression of the county argument to doing it that we've ever seen. Obviously, capital will always have its way in a lot of these real estate decisions. And it kept on making a narrow kind of sense if you would bake in having insurance to continue to produce these units of housing. I'm not saying this event will be the triggering thing that stops it already. We're seeing seismic shifts in the real estate markets across Florida. But I do think it's something that everyone will think about from now until the rest of our lives in Florida. Yeah.
So this is the thing that I think folks really have to get their heads around. There's criticisms of the evacuations in Pinellas. I'm not here to defend. You and I take lots of shots and critiques of our public officials, starting with our governor. But I have to say, there are now so many people in the Tampa Bay area, between the barrier islands and the exposed areas to the Gulf and the Bay, in Pinellas County, and then Zone 1, Zone A, in Hillsborough County, in West Shore, in South Tampa, in Davis Island, Channel Side, on and on and on. There are so many people in these places, it is now becoming impossible to evacuate them. So I just unfortunately think this is something that was bound to happen, because you can't get people out of those areas quickly enough. Because there's so many people in the Tampa St. Pete metropolitan area now that live in vulnerable parts of the area, Brian.
Arguably everyone.
Yeah, arguably the whole metropolitan area is vulnerable. Because here's another thing we found, like the canals, kind of those brackish canals you have on the Hillsborough side of the bay, they all overflowed. Many of them overflowed because the surge came from the bay, and those canals are connected to the bay. And then on the Pinellas side, I think I mentioned this earlier, you have these lakes or bayous. They call them bayous in Pasco, but they call them lakes in Pinellas. But they're basically the same thing, right? These kind of back lakes, freshwater, but in between the brackish water of Tampa Bay and the saltwater of the Gulf, right? On the peninsula that is Pinellas County, those places all got some sort of water event, and that water started spreading in the streets too. So, so you're right. It's not just the people living right on the ocean or on the bay. It is arguably the whole Tampa Bay area is vulnerable, or at least all of Hillsborough and Pinellas.
Absolutely right. And again, I say this as someone who lives dozens of miles inland. I was terrified of this Gulf storm, and everybody who's there. It's just, it was a reminder of how fragile life is in Florida between the coast of both the Gulf and the ocean.
Yeah, and we're going to go in a minute, but one other thing that just popped into my mind, and because this is an unfolding event, there's going to be a lot more we know in 2 or 3 days. I'm wondering how places like Riverview and Gibsonton did in the storm, also because the Alafaya River and the other river that comes through, the Little Manatee River, they connect right into Tampa Bay. So they probably had some sort of surge event there too. And Riverview, believe it or not now, Ryan, has over 100,000 people. It's a big place now. So,
oh my God, it's like Brandon was 15 years ago.
That's the perfect comparison. So your point of that everybody arguably is in a vulnerable place, I'm always thinking, okay, if you're England and Hillsborough, you're not. But you are. In reality. And, I've seen this in my own area where I am in extreme western Broward County. I live less than a mile away from the open Everglades. That's how far west I am. And I've seen in some of these storms, water levels come up, and as the water management district tries to manipulate the water levels in places, water come into my backyard, right? I mean, that's just what happens. So, because all of these water systems are interconnected, and now we have built in the most vulnerable places, just to say the least. So,
trickling down in many cases.
Yeah. So, last point before we go. Tallahassee, this was supposed to be Tallahassee's storm. It wasn't. It was a storm for the peninsula and the Big Bend. The Big Bend east of a certain point, right? This is kind of an advertisement for the livability of Tallahassee, because part of the reason some of us were so concerned about you guys in Leon County was in the peninsula, we're always thinking about these things, right? As you said, growing up in South Tampa, you're always thinking about it. You're thinking about when low tide and high tide are. You're not thinking about that in Tallahassee. So we thought, okay, Tallahassee's especially vulnerable because they've never gone through this. Well, in fact, maybe this was an advertisement for how much more sustainable and livable Leon County is than Hillsborough, than Pinellas, than Broward, than Duval, right? These places that have lots and lots of vulnerable coastline and low-lying regions.
Yes, I agree. If you're a cool person listening to this, come on up. Everybody else, I don't know. Yeah, no, I definitely think so. I mean, I've always been long on Leon County, long on Tallahassee. I've always thought that it's a good place to live. And, I totally agree. I mean, I think that as a matter of fact, by the actuaries and the professional statisticians about this stuff, that there's going to be in-state migration to North Florida over time, and I think that this could absolutely be an event that accelerates it.
Great. Well, we're going to keep you updated at the Florida Squeeze and everywhere. Social media channels, this podcast, everywhere in the next few days about unfolding events all over the state related to the storm, particularly in the Tampa Bay area. So, Ryan, thank you, and we're glad you are safe, and we hope everybody out there is safe and able to listen to this and able to kind of comprehend this and take in the lessons. It's a lot of raw emotion. You heard it out of both of our voices, but we will be with you through this crisis.
Yes, thoughts to everybody, and thanks a lot for talking with us. And thanks for listening. Thanks for having me on, Carter.